Hi, it's Steph, and today I'm going to do a kind of end of May garden tour. Things are just starting to pick up, and so I think that I'm going to do these pretty regularly from now through July because that is when the garden is at its peak. So the stars of the show today are going to be the iris and the lupin, but I'm going to show you some other things that are in bloom. And we'll start here with these pots. The ones behind me are empty because I have to plant them up for summer, and that will be done probably in the next week. But these at the bottom here, I did a video about a month ago where I used perennials in my planters, and they're looking really beautiful right now. All of the pincushion flower has bloomed. I actually have to go through and deadhead them, and the candy tuft also needs to be cut back. The lamium is filling out, and the pansies are blooming. So all in all, they're looking really nice, and now I just have to fill up the other planters with some summer blooms. So my front beds are really starting to, show off now, and the iris and the allium, as well as the salvia and the nepeta, are certainly starting to bloom beautifully right now. I still have all of my tulip foliage, and I have to wait a couple more weeks before I'm able to cut that back. You want to wait for your tulip foliage to die all the way back so that you don't risk, not getting as many blooms next year. Tulips don't always perennialize, but I'm going to see if these come back for one more year. I have a few varieties of iris planted down the walkway, and they're all a little bit different. I don't recall the name of this one, but it's beautiful. It has a light peach color with these purple falls. It's stunning. This is Purple Sensation Allium. I've had these here for a couple of years. And I really love the way that they just tower over the lower plants, and the way they sway in the wind. They're just really beautiful. I have some foxglove in the back that is getting ready to bloom in the next few weeks, and that is Apricot Delight or Apricot Beauty. I believe it's Apricot Beauty, and it's going to be really pretty. It should bloom at the same time as my double pink knockout roses, so I think that will make for a stunning show. Here's some more iris that are just starting to open up. And so I love the layering of purple. There's 3 different colors of purple going on here with the allium, the nepeta, as well as the salvia. This variety of salvia is called May Night, and it's one of the first plants that I actually planted in these beds about 9 years ago. And they've multiplied, and I've been able to divide them and dot them along my walkway. And I have them strategically placed in front of my pink knockout roses because I love the way that the pink and the purple look together. This whole walkway is primarily pink and purple, with a little bit of accents of yellow with my shrubs. My candy corn spirea is looking a beautiful shade of yellow at the moment. This shrub has already gone through 3 color changes. It started bright red in early spring, then it turned orange, and now it's going to this yellow, and then it'll end up being like a chartreuse color, which is like a yellow green, and then the tips will always have a little bit of that orange color. And it puts on clusters of pink blooms in the summer. It's a really beautiful, versatile shrub and offers a lot of interest to your beds. My Japanese maple is also looking beautiful. It's all leafed out at the moment. And a little bit further down the walkway, you're probably wondering why I have a little side table. And the reason for this is because I transplanted a coneflower a couple of days ago, and I didn't want it to wilt. It's been really warm and sunny. And so a trick is, if you want to make sure that your transplant is okay when the weather is kind of warm, you want to keep it watered and you want to keep it shaded. So I put this little table here to offer some shade to my transplant. You could use a lawn chair, anything. And so it's doing pretty well. That is a white swan coneflower. Over here I have another cluster of iris that is a little further behind the others, and that should open up in the next few weeks. And continuing down the walkway, I have more of the same repetition. I like to repeat the plants because I think it gives it a nice flow and continuation when you're walking up the walkway. I have this evergreen shrub here. This is a yellow mop false cypress, and it was actually a full shrub, And last year I took off all of the lower branching to expose the structure of the plant, and I topiaried it. It's actually looking like a small tree at the moment because it's gotten really shaggy from all of the new growth, but I am going to go in and prune it soon to give it more of a topiary look. So right here I have a Hinoki false cypress, and I absolutely love this evergreen shrub. This was a tiny little baby when I first bought it, and it's actually grown so much, actually much larger than I expected it to be. I bought another one last year and I planted it in the backyard, but the deer had a field day and chewed it to pieces. So I don't know if it's going to make it, but I would like to find another one to replace it because I love this, absolutely love this evergreen. So in this bed here, the star at the moment is this blue spruce. It's a weeping blue spruce. I'll actually get in on the tag so you can see what it is. And I used to have a weeping cherry here. It was one of those ornamental cherry trees. And I didn't like the way that it looked because it only had blooms for maybe 2 weeks in the spring, and then it was just this gnarly mess of green foliage. So what I did is I replaced it with a conifer instead, and now I get year-round color with this. This is actually called the Blues Blue Spruce, and it's a weeping blue spruce. And this is the shape of it. It's like a weeping tree, and it gets about 6 tall by 6 wide. And you can see that it has all new growth at the moment, and the new growth is beautiful because it's all these little soft pom-poms at the end of the shrub or the tree. And I did the same thing in this bed where I repeated the border of Cat's Pajama Nepeta, and I think it looks really nice. I have this Weigela here. This is a dwarf Weigela. It's called My Monet Purple Effect, and it has variegated foliage, and it's just starting to bloom these little purple pink bell-shaped flowers. I also have some clusters of Millennium Allium here in the front. These 3 clumps of grass, that's what they are, and they'll bloom in another week, like another month or so, they'll start blooming. I have a couple of roses. This is Eustacia V by David Austin. It's a little bit smaller than I thought it would be on year 2, but the foliage looks okay so far. And then in the back there, I have another Japanese maple, a weeping Japanese maple, that has a really beautiful wingspan. And then I have 5 Bobo hydrangeas along the back of this bed, and they're just such a beautiful hydrangea. They offer color from the early summer when they start blooming in white, and then they age to pink, and then they have like an antique pink as the fall rolls in. You never have to do anything to these. They just look pretty all season long. In the back, I have a bunch of Liatris and Iris, which are those grassy clumps that you see. And those will start blooming soon as well. I have 2 clumps of white iris, they're Siberian iris, and purple Liatris. This rose here is in great shape, and I hope it stays that way because I don't have much luck with roses. This is an Olivia Rose Austin, and it's a soft pink cupped rose, and it's absolutely beautiful. In the end there, I have a peony, I say peony, and I actually have 2 peonies in this bed. That one there is called Maximus Festivus. It's a white, and it has a lot of buds. And this is a bare root peony. So this is only this is the 3rd year I've had it. So last year I had a little bit of foliage, and this year I actually get blooms, which is really exciting. And I have another one down the end there that has darker foliage that I'll show you as well. And that one I believe is called Shirley Temple. So I have this shrub, or it's a small tree right now, This is called a Sunny Girlfriend, Twisted Sunny Girlfriend, that's what it is. And it's a hinoki, it's a type of hinoki, and it gets to be about 4 by 6, so 6 feet tall, 4 feet wide, so it's supposed to be a dwarf conifer. And I think it's really beautiful because it will add some yellow to this bed, which is a component I like to add to all of my beds. Blue, green, yellow, and red. And here on the side of it, I was actually adding some fresh soil to the base of this plant, and I found that there was a Japanese maple seedling. So I put a cage around it. Cage being one of these mesh baskets from the Dollar Tree. This is great to use as a cloche to protect things in your garden. And I'm just gonna let it grow on in there. And then once it gets bigger, I can transplant it somewhere else in the garden. So right here in this corner is the other peony that I have in this bed. And this peony is called Shirley Temple. And again, this is bare root. It was bought at the same time as the one on the other end. So this is year 3. And it has some blooms. So here on the side of our driveway, we have these 2 beautiful Bloodgood Japanese maples. These are the first trees that we planted here on our property about 9 years ago, and they've grown beautifully. And just recently, we added these 3 Ivory Halo Red Twig Dogwoods. At some point, we will likely join these 2 trees, creating an island bed. And I'll also incorporate some ornamental grasses in this area as well. And here is our Heritage River Birch that we planted in April. It's now all leafed out and it seems to be happy, and we are really happy with it. It looks really beautiful and adds such a nice touch to our garden. So this is our patio bed, and we just recently mulched it for the season, and the mulch really just gives it such a nice finishing touch. It makes all the plants stand out and pop. So here we have a beautiful, another Japanese maple, which is a nice feature tree in this bed. I have another My Monet Purple Effect Weigela. And I have a combination of things. Most of them are not in bloom yet, but getting ready. My daffodils are now spent. I have a beautiful clump of sedum, and I actually really love sedum even when it looks like at this stage, when it's just nicely, you know, formed like a little clump. I planted 5 wee white hydrangeas. I chose these specifically because they're petite, so they won't overtake the other plants in the bed. They only get to be about 2 by 2 tall and wide, so I have a clump there, here, and I just dotted them along the way. There's 5 in total. In the back there, I have some tall alliums. One variety is called Globemaster, and the only thing that is currently in bloom in this bed, besides some of the Nepeta that's already starting, is my Geum and my Azalea. So we're gonna go to that side and check those out. I have this beautiful pink azalea here, and this azalea is sentimental. My grandmother actually gave this to me before she passed away, and so it's been planted here for about 9 years now. And every year when it blooms, it reminds me of her, and I love it so much. And here I have 3 clumps of Mai Tai Geum, and I actually love this plant. It has all these beautiful, dainty little apricot colored flowers, and they have been blooming their heads off for over a week now, and there's still a bunch of buds getting ready to open. And in this corner here, if you watched our video where we went to the tulip farm and then we had an impromptu nursery visit, we ended up picking up this topiary or standard blue spruce. You can also call them lollipop blue spruce. And we decided to put it here in the corner of this bed to add some evergreen interest. So in the winter, we'll have this shrub or tree, as well as our yellow mop to offer some color during those months. And in this corner here, I planted a summer gold Japanese maple. And this is a beautiful yellow Japanese maple that maintains this yellow color all summer long. And it's also heat tolerant. So this is a full sun location and it seems to do fine. It does have a little bit of budworm damage at the moment, and we've been spraying BT weekly to sort of remedy that. But it has beautiful foliage and wonderful color. Our magnolia is now fully leafed out and it has beautiful, just green, shiny foliage. And underneath it, I have a drift of astilbe. And I've been fertilizing the astilbe and it's starting to put up bloom stalks. These were all bare root with the exception of this one, which I just planted last week that I picked up at the roadside plant stand here in my town. And this one even has a bloom. So I'll get to see what color it is. So bare root plants are a great affordable option. I mean, it does take 1 or 2 seasons for you to start getting blooms, but I mean, you get a few bare root bulbs in a bag for a few dollars and you get all these plants. So here in this corner of my shed bed, I'll start with the trellis. So on this trellis, I have 2 clematis. One of them is Duchess of Edinburgh and it's a white clematis. And the other is a purple clematis. These came in a bag from Longfield Gardens, and this is year 2, and they're also bare root. This rose in the center is doing amazing. This is actually a Zephrine Drouin rose that I purchased at Lowe's for $9.98, and it has put on amazing growth. This is a climber that is thornless, and I'm going to train it to climb up this trellis. And it also tolerates part shade, which is amazing because while it does get some sun here, I'm anticipating as this magnolia grows that it'll become more shady. Here I have a quick fire hydrangea, and this one is also beautiful. It has like almost like a red pink bloom. And these 3 clumps of grass here are my Carl Forrester grasses. They're a columnar, more compact form of grass. They get 2 to 3 feet wide and 4 to 6 feet tall once the plumes emerge. And I really love the way that grasses offer such movement and texture to your garden. And right in the center, I actually have a clump of variegated iris. I did think that the blooms would be larger than what they are. This is my 2nd year with these in my garden, so I may have to relocate this clump because I thought that they would be much taller in the center of these grasses. But I love the foliage on that iris. So here in this other shed bed, so this is on the opposite side, I have 3 little lime hydrangeas and some clumps of grass. These are a dwarf grass. They're called Hamlin. And this hydrangea, I actually layered it by accident. And layering means if you have a low-hanging branch and you put something to weight it down, the hydrangea will root, in essence creating another plant. So in about another year or so, once this becomes larger, I am going to move this clump and transplant it somewhere else in my garden. But this little lime and the other 2, I have 3 altogether, have been here for 2 years now. And again, these, you don't have to do anything with them. They start with the blooms that are like a green color, then they go white, and then they go pink, and then they look like an antique color into the fall. They're absolutely beautiful and fuss-free. The deer do like to eat them though, so you should spray them periodically to keep them away. I have some more iris dotted along the back here. And this Japanese maple here to the left of the bed, the corner, is a Katsura Japanese maple, and it has the most beautiful spring color. It started out almost looking like a fiery orange, and it's now starting to transition to its summer color by turning different shades of green and yellow. this area here is our Japanese maple garden that we are still developing. We recently started collecting some flagstone, and so the plan is to make a flagstone path throughout our garden and add some gravel in between, and I think it's going to look really beautiful. We've actually been collecting this stone by scouring Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and we've been doing really well actually, and getting some good deals and some bargains on this, which is exciting. So I will share that at some point in a video. And over to the side here we have a bunch of Japanese maple, hence the name Japanese Maple Garden. So we started a collection, and this came about as a way to get my husband a little bit more into the garden. And so George doesn't enjoy gardening, that's no secret. He just likes to cut the lawn, and he will help me around the yard when I need it. But he does love Japanese maples. And so when I caught wind of that, I went ahead and I ordered a bunch of Japanese maples for our anniversary, and I said, these are your gift, all of these trees. And so he had no choice but to just dive in and start caring for the trees. And I have to say that this has been a fun project to work on together. So this one here is his favorite tree actually, and it's called Autumn Moon Japanese Maple, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's what's called a full moon Japanese maple, and they call that based on the shape of the foliage. So as you can see, there are Japanese maples dotted throughout this space, as well as some conifers. And so this space warrants a video of its own, and so that is coming at some point this summer. So stay tuned. But we'll go ahead and move on to another area of the garden. So if I had to describe the state of my garden at the moment, it would be a mullet. There is all business up front, with the garden looking really beautiful and nice and tidy and mulched. And then the back is the party. So business up front, party in the back. And this is a mess. This bed is in a state of disarray. There are weeds everywhere. It needs to be weeded. It needs to be mulched. I have some thistles in here that are really prickly. And so this week, the chore is going to be to focus on getting this bed shaped up for the season. But there are two things that look really beautiful at the moment, and that is this dogwood. It is a white dogwood, but it has variegated foliage, yellow and green. It was an unnamed variety. I purchased it at Home Depot, and it just said white dogwood, but I love it. And also, I have a purple columbine in the corner there that is also in full bloom and looking beautiful. So in this bed, there's a couple of things that I will show you that are looking really nice. This is my Geranium macrorhizae, and it has such a wonderful scent, and it also just finished blooming. It sends off these little pink blooms that are really sweet, and this makes an excellent ground cover. So I'm actually getting ready to take a few clumps of this and dot it in other places, potentially that bed that I have to weed, so that it can fill up some space, so that in the future I will get less weeds over there with this as a ground cover. The other thing that also looks beautiful here is the Solomon seal. That is a variegated Solomon seal in the back, and it actually has blooms. The blooms are just these little white dangles that hang from the bottom of the foliage underneath. In this corner here, I have this hosta that actually escaped me being able to transplant it. I didn't see that it was here, so I wasn't able to pull it up, but I actually am going to move it before the deer find it and eat it. Here I have a lilac that is now in bloom and looking lovely. And right around the corner, I have a rhododendron that is also getting ready to bloom. And the last thing that I saw this week in this bed was this columbine that was also bare root, planted last year, that just bloomed these sweet little maroon blossoms. They're very layered and dainty and pretty. This is my vegetable garden, or what I'm calling my potager these days. The reason I call it that is because I grow vegetables and flowers in here. And the flowers that I grow are dahlias. And so I recently planted all of my dahlias, but I will show you something that is in bloom that looks really pretty right now. And that is my chives. Chive blossoms are so beautiful. These are a member of the allium family, and so they always bloom at this time every year. You can actually even cut these and put them in a bud vase, and they're really adorable. All of these stakes are where my dahlias are planted, and I also got my tomatoes planted out and a few other things. I seeded my zucchini, and my green beans are actually starting to emerge as well. Under this cover, I have all of my brassicas, such as kale and collards and broccoli. This is an insect netting to keep the cabbage loopers away from attacking all of the foliage. But this was just a quick glimpse into the vegetable garden, and now we will continue on. And right here outside of my vegetable garden, I have a pollinator bed that is nice and green, and the clematis is actually in bloom. This clematis is called Presidente, and it's beautiful purple. And here I have a drift or a clump of Asiatic lilies that the foliage looks really healthy, and I actually have to spray it because the bunnies love this stuff. So if you haven't yet, this is your reminder to go ahead and spray your lilies. Here I have a Colorado blue spruce, and the story of this tree is that it was supposed to be a dwarf. This was supposed to be a baby blue eyes dwarf Colorado blue spruce. And while it's a beauty, it is also much too large to be planted this close to the house. So at some point it is going to have to be cut down, unfortunately, because we don't want it to cause any damage to the house. But it is now putting out all of its spring growth, and it is lovely. The tree itself is kind of prickly, but the new growth is really soft feeling, which is really cool. And now what I think is the star of the show this week, all of my lupin, and a close second is the iris. So this lupin was grown last year in 2021 using the winter sowing method. And last year they didn't do a lot. They were just small seedlings, little clumps of foliage. But this year, they are certainly putting on a show. And so this is one clump here. And then in this corner, I have my Fire Glow Japanese Maple, some more Cat's Pajama Nepeta. And as you come around the bend here, I have a variety of peach, like a very light blush colored iris. This variety is called Concertina, and it has like a beautiful purple inside. It's stunning. Here I have a different type, but it's also the same coloring, but opposite. So here we have the blush color in the center with these beautiful purple falls. They're purple and white with a tangerine accent. And the story with this lupin, I did winter sow it like I said, is that I didn't anticipate it getting quite this tall. So in my opinion, it's much too tall for the front of the border. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to transplant it in the fall from the front to the back on either side of that Blue Atlas cedar serpentine tree that I have there. Because I think these will make a really nice back of the border plant. And then in the front, I'm just going to add some more of my white swan echinacea. So here is my Semfalse spirea, And this tree, or shrub I should say, has such beautiful foliage. It starts with early spring when it puts on all of these pink and orange and yellow coloring. And then it turns this beautiful shade of chartreuse. And then it will turn mostly green and send out these plumes of white flowers that almost look like tiny little pearls. And they're a little fuzzy, just really pretty. You do have to be careful with this one because it likes to send out runners. So if it's something you don't want to deal with, you might want to stay away from them. But otherwise, they are a beautiful, eye-catching shrub. Over here, I have a Wine and Roses Weigela. And this is a beautiful dark foliage Weigela. As you can see, it's getting pretty tall. And it also has little trumpet-shaped pink blooms that are just starting to open up. And lastly, to feature in this bed is this beautiful Norway spruce. I bought this plant for $45 at Home Depot as a tiny little 2-foot tree. And look at it now. For reference, I'm 5'4" and it's way taller than me. So in just about 5 years, this tree has grown tremendously. And it's also putting out its soft spring growth, and it is just a beautiful, beautiful evergreen. Thank you for joining me on a garden tour. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting the notification bell so that you don't miss any upcoming videos. I will try to get out about 2 videos a week this time of year and share my garden with you all. And thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.